If you want to see change in your child's eating habits without pressure, constant mealtime battles, or the shame you grew up with, you're in the right place. Welcome to Family in Focus. I'm Dr. Wendy Schofer, the pediatrician helping parents lead meaningful change without harm. Here we focus on the connection and practical shifts that help families thrive at every size. Let's get started. Welcome back. This is an episode that every single adult who cares for any child in the world needs to hear. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, doesn't matter if you're an educator, a physician, a grandparent, a neighbor. Everyone needs this. So please pause for a moment, share it, and then come back. All right, let's dive in. So here in the States, it is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And what I'd really like to do is to be able to explore not from the perspective about the typical things that we do when we think about eating disorders. We get afraid. You start talking about how we're trying to avoid this diagnosis and what is it that we need to do to treat effectively. And those are absolutely necessary steps. And yet, we have a significant increase in the prevalence of eating disorders. So it is very likely that you know someone who is struggling with eating disorders. And it is absolutely certain that you know someone who is struggling with disordered eating. And my entire mission is to be able to really support families to be able to create the habits and the relationships with food and body and each other that are protective for eating disorders. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today, really looking at an awareness of the patterns. And my colleagues are definitely going to be focusing on the patterns of diagnosis and treatment. I want to help you focus on the patterns of prevention, awareness, prevention, and protection. All right, so let's dive in. First of all, let's just identify why this is a concern. So I am not one to quote statistics, and so I'm one who looks them up because numbers are not my language. But what I do is I go to the National Eating Disorders Association, so NEDA. You can find them at nationaleatingdisorders.org, and they've got fabulous information. This is a very reliable source of information. And let's just cover a couple of things here. So statistics in general about eating disorders. You'll find that 9% of the US population, or 30 million Americans, will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. And this is coming from a report that was dated in 2020. The overall lifetime prevalence of eating disorders is estimated to be about 8.5% among females and around 4% around males. Every 52 minutes, one person dies as a direct consequence of an eating disorder. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death for those diagnosed with an eating disorder. And then let's look at how dieting and eating disorders are related. And there are statistics that NEDA has about these, different articles that they are highlighting. So the fear of weight gain, feeling like one is overeating, feelings of guilt, thinking about dieting, and a desire for thinness, pretty darn common in our society right now. These are predictive of eating disorder severity. 62% of teenage girls, 28% of teenage boys report trying to lose weight. 58% of girls, 28% of boys are actively dieting. And 68% of girls, 51% of boys exercise with the goal of losing weight or trying to avoid gaining weight. I highlight all of these numbers because different ones may stand out to you. Different ones may resonate with you. But the thing is that these are all concerns about eating disorders, and we aren't necessarily seeing the full picture because this is really a pattern that we're noticing about our relationship with food and our body and how that relationship can become strained. And then with that, we develop patterns where there's disordered eating, disordered approaches to exercise and body image. And with continued practice, with continued, like ongoing with that pattern, it can cross a threshold to become an eating disorder. Now, the other thing that we have to highlight right now is over the past, I'm going to say 5-ish years, we have had a significant increase in eating disorder diagnoses and disordered eating along with that. And it's really a confluence of different factors. Let's just first call it out that eating disorders are complex. There is not one trigger, if you will. There is not one thing that indicates that someone will develop an eating disorder or that one is protected and they will never struggle with an eating disorder whatsoever. It's complex. And yet, over the past several years, we have seen significant increases in disordered eating and eating disorders. And just think about how this makes sense. For one thing, there has been such a focus on bodies. Kids are growing up in a size-obsessed world. So much focusing on bodies to be able to determine health status. That's not doing any help whatsoever as we have individuals that are struggling with their body image. What I have seen is that we have had significant emphasis on the obesity epidemic. In fact, that's how it is described. And I'm just going to put it in air quotes here, the obesity epidemic. What's happening is we have so much focus on health status based off of the scale, based off of external appearance. And then we're labeling it as an epidemic, which automatically triggers fear, which automatically brings so much attention to I'm going to say to the issue, but to the focus that we're having right now, which is on weight, on size. In our culture, we're receiving so many messages about eat less, move more, about how that impacts our health and our fitness. And so diet culture, fitness culture, health culture, they're all intertwined. And they're reinforcing the messages from each other, which is often you need to do something. You need to change the way you look. My goodness, let's just throw in all of the social media that has really expanded, or I'm going to say exploded into our homes, because we are being bombarded by messages all day long. Our phones are not very far away. Mine is right here. And all you see are messages about appearance, about weight, about size, about health. And try to turn on any kind of regular television show, and you're going to be bombarded by medications, those direct-to-consumer medication ads that are largely about weight loss. They're largely about weight loss now. So we are being bombarded by these messages. In addition, there has been an inordinate increase in the amount of stress that family members of all ages are experiencing. We can look back at the years around 2020 with the COVID pandemic, and yet that stress did not decrease. It did not go away. In fact, we've had many more layers of political, financial, social stress that has been thrown right on top of that. When we are experiencing stress, there's often a sense of a lack of control. And so I'll use the example of going back to the early days of COVID, where we had no idea where things were going. All of a sudden, our institutions were being shut down. We were being told to stay at home, to stay away from our loved ones and our community members. And so there was a lack of control that was there. All these things that are outside of control. And so it made sense that a lot of people turned to food to control, either controlling how much they were eating, or perhaps turning to food to comfort, to find that they were perhaps in a little bit of control right here in this moment. The other thing that's been happening, and another pattern, is to notice that we have so much more conversation right now about neurodiversity and family members with neurodiversity. And kids with neurodiversity have additional struggles with their relationship with food. there's a lot of focus on what they're eating and trying to get them to eat more. And the more that we focus on that, the more that we're trying to push them to eat more, the more that a lot of them are pushing back because food doesn't feel safe anymore. So I highlight these because you may see that there's, kind of like different suggestions of diagnoses behind this, but I want you to look at the patterns and which patterns you may have in your house. Because it's not about fearing a diagnosis. It's about recognizing patterns that we can start shifting in the earliest phases. If you look at the patterns over the last 5 to 10 years, we have really made food, body, and weight such a focus in our lives. And to no big surprise, we have struggled more and more with all of the above: food, body relationships, and weight. The more we focus on it, the more we struggle. So you may be asking, well, what should I be focusing on? What can I do right now? I want to be able to help my family members. I want to be able to help myself. And so what we're going to do is actually slow things down. So the pattern over the last 5, 10 years has been to put so much focus and stress on food, body, and weight. And we need to step back and remove some of that stress. And here's the reason why. The stress cycle, let's just highlight this really quickly. When we are in a stress cycle, when we are stressed, we are focusing on, I just want to survive this day to be able to make it to the next. Well, we have increases in stress. Well, we have increases in cortisol. We have emotional dysregulation. There's control, there's pressure. It becomes this vicious cycle. And when we can address that stress, call it out first of all, and start decreasing the stress, what happens is we can start switching from a fear-based prevention, which is often the approach to eating disorders. It's like, I want to avoid this diagnosis. I want to avoid this condition or this experience. There's a lot of fear there. Parents right now, it's understandable that we feel like we're fearing either eating disorders or metabolic conditions. That's not a good place for any of us to be. And it contributes to that stress that we're experiencing. And so if we can start identifying stress as the problem, stress as a significant contributor to the struggles that we're having right now with food, body, and weight, we can notice that it's patterns. Again, those patterns, I keep on coming back to it because the more that we recognize patterns, the more that we can address them and the more that we can actually start shifting patterns, kind of like redirecting. And so you may be asking, well, what does that look like? What is a pattern that I want? Actually focusing on the patterns of what you want. We keep on trying to avoid disordered eating. We're trying to avoid metabolic conditions. What is it that you do want? More often than not, when I ask parents that, what they want is for their kids to have healthy relationships with their food, a healthy relationship with their body. And when we focus on creating those relationships, we're actually decreasing the stress. We're building the foundation for what it is that we want to enjoy now and what it is that we're going to be having going into the future. This is really how we shift the focus from a prevention and an avoidance, like I'm trying to avoid a diagnosis, to actually creating protective measures. So, eating disorder awareness, creating protective factors that we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to fear disordered eating. It comes back to there is no quick fix. And that's really something that we've been looking for so much with diagnosis and treatment. We just want to fix it right now. That is stress wanting us to just survive, make it to the next day. And so what we're going to be doing is slowing it down to become very aware of the patterns that you see and start shifting to the ones that support you and your children. Those patterns of actually slowing down itself is a tremendous new pattern. that can definitely influence the way that we eat, the way that we move. And by the way, it's so much more than that. The way that we sleep, the way that we interact, the way that we connect human to human. My challenge to you today, my invitation, is to just slow down just enough to start asking yourself, what patterns am I noticing today? Whether that's the pattern of how you're feeling, what kind of emotions are happening, or maybe even just noticing what are the patterns that you notice at the dinner table. No judgment, no trying to fix anything, just an awareness. You have to slow down first to be able to see that. And then we're going to continue the conversation because that slowing down, that awareness, that pattern recognition is critical in order to be able to then start seeing how you want to start creating little shifts over time to build the relationships that you actually want to share with your family. We're going to talk about that next time. I'll see you there.